Once upon a time, the financial world was captivated by the brilliance of Charles Ponzi, the mastermind behind one of America's most lucrative investment schemes. With millions at his fingertips and eager crowds clamoring to invest, Ponzi seemed to hold the keys to success. Yet unbeknownst to everyone, his empire was constructed on sheer deceit. What appeared to be a booming business was, in reality, a grand scam that enriched Ponzi, but devastated countless innocent lives. His shocking betrayal became so notorious that even after a century, it still bears his name, the Ponzi scheme. This video unveils the hidden truths of the man behind the fraud and reveals how he amassed wealth through nothing but lies. Charles Ponzi was born Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi on March 3, 1882, in Lugo, Italy, into a well-respected and relatively affluent family. His parents, who were middle class, ensured that young Carlo received a good education. As a child, Ponzi was known for his charm and wit, qualities that would later become crucial in his schemes. In the late 19th century, Italy was struggling economically, and like many young Italians of his generation, Ponzi sought opportunities abroad. His family saw promise in him, and despite their modest means, they managed to send him to the prestigious University of Rome, La Sapienza. However, Ponzi was more interested in living the high life than in his studies, and he soon squandered his tuition money on fine dining and socializing. In 1903, at the age of 21, Ponzi decided to emigrate to the United States, following the tide of European immigrants who believed America to be the land of opportunity. He arrived in Boston with just $2.50 in his pocket, having gambled away the rest of his $200 savings during the voyage. The charismatic young immigrant was full of dreams, but reality hit hard as he struggled to find stable employment. Upon his arrival in the United States, Ponzi took on various odd jobs to make ends meet. He worked as a dishwasher in a restaurant where he earned just $5 a week. Determined to rise above his circumstances, Ponzi eventually moved to Canada, where he found employment as a clerk at Banco Zerosi in Montreal. Banco Zerosi was run by Luigi "Louis" Zerosi, an Italian immigrant who catered to the Italian community in Montreal. It was at Banco Zerosi that Ponzi got his first taste of financial schemes. Zerosi was offering high interest rates to attract deposits, but the bank was essentially insolvent. Ponzi observed Zerosi's methods closely and learned how the bank was using incoming deposits to pay off earlier depositors, a classic example of what would later be known as a Ponzi scheme. When the bank inevitably collapsed, Zerosi fled to Mexico, leaving Ponzi without a job. Desperate and broke, Ponzi forged a check and was caught and arrested. He spent 3 years in a Canadian prison for the forgery. Upon his release, Ponzi returned to the United States, only to be arrested again for smuggling Italian immigrants across the border. He was sentenced to another 2 years in prison. After his release from prison in 1911, Ponzi returned to Boston and took on a series of small jobs, including working as an English translator and as a clerk. Despite his repeated failures and brushes with the law, Ponzi remained determined to find a way to achieve wealth and success. In 1919, Ponzi came across an idea that would catapult him into infamy. While handling correspondence for a business dealing with international trade, Ponzi received a letter from Spain containing an international reply coupon, IRC. These coupons could be exchanged for postage stamps in other countries, allowing the sender to prepay the postage for a reply. Ponzi realized that due to fluctuations in currency values after World War I, it was possible to buy IRCs cheaply in Europe and redeem them for more expensive U.S. postage stamps. He saw an opportunity to make a profit by exploiting this arbitrage. Ponzi initially borrowed money from friends and promised them a hefty return on their investment within 45 days. He claimed that he could generate a 50% profit in just that short time. Word of his lucrative returns spread quickly, and soon, investors were flocking to Ponzi in droves, eager to hand over their money. In December 1919, Ponzi established the Securities Exchange Company to formalize his scheme. He promised returns of 50% in 45 days or 100% in 90 days, an offer that seemed too good to be true, yet many people were convinced by Ponzi's charisma and confidence. He continued to collect investments, but instead of actually purchasing IRCs, Ponzi used the funds from new investors to pay off earlier investors. This created the illusion of a profitable business, as early investors were receiving their promised returns and eagerly reinvesting their profits. By mid-1920, Ponzi was a wealthy man. He lived lavishly, buying a mansion in Lexington, Massachusetts, and enjoying the luxuries of life. However, the rapid expansion of his scheme brought increased scrutiny. In July 1920, the Boston Post began publishing a series of articles questioning the legitimacy of Ponzi's operation. Reporters calculated that for Ponzi's business to be legitimate, there would need to be about 160 million IRCs in circulation, but there were only about 27,000. As the press and government investigators dug deeper, they discovered that Ponzi had only purchased a handful of IRCs. It became clear that his business was a fraud. The Massachusetts Bank Commissioner soon began an investigation, and on August 10, 1920, Ponzi was arrested for mail fraud. The news of Ponzi's arrest caused panic among his investors, many of whom had entrusted their life savings to him. In total, Ponzi had swindled investors out of about $15 million, an astronomical sum at the time, equivalent to about $225 million today. Ponzi initially maintained his innocence, claiming that his business was legitimate and that he had simply made poor financial decisions. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was indicted on 86 counts of mail fraud and ultimately pleaded guilty to one of the charges, hoping for leniency. In 1920, Ponzi was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. However, his legal troubles were far from over. After serving 3.5 years of his sentence, he was released on bail pending appeals on state charges. Ponzi fled to Florida, where he attempted to start a new scam involving real estate, but he was quickly caught and sentenced to an additional 7 years in prison. After serving his sentence in federal prison, Ponzi faced deportation due to his criminal record. He was eventually deported to Italy in 1934, where he arrived as a destitute man. Back in Italy, Ponzi struggled to find a place for himself. He tried various schemes, including working as an airline promoter in Mussolini's Italy, but his reputation as a swindler had preceded him. His charm, which had once been his greatest asset, was no longer enough to secure a stable income or position. In 1939, Ponzi moved to Brazil, where he lived in poverty. He worked as a translator and occasional teacher to make ends meet. His health began to deteriorate, and he suffered a stroke in 1941 that left him partially paralyzed. Charles Ponzi died on January 18, 1949, in a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro. He was penniless and alone, his life having come full circle from the dreams of wealth that had driven him to America decades earlier. In his final years, Ponzi reportedly expressed little regret for his actions, claiming that the victims of his schemes had been as greedy as he was. Ponzi's legacy is defined by the term Ponzi scheme, which has become synonymous with financial fraud. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and the allure of easy money, and it remains one of the most infamous episodes in the history of financial crime. Charles Ponzi's life is a testament to the power of charisma, the lure of wealth, and the devastating consequences of financial fraud. From his humble beginnings in Italy to his rise and fall as one of the most notorious con men in history, Ponzi's story is both fascinating and tragic. Though he lived a life filled with deceit and manipulation, his impact on the world of finance and crime is undeniable. The term Ponzi scheme endures as a reminder of his fraudulent legacy, cautioning future generations against the seductive promise of too good to be true investments. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and ring the bell for future updates. Your support means the world to us, and we look forward to sharing more captivating content with you in our next video. Until next time, stay curious.
Exploring the pinnacle of luxury with Luxury Queen.